for some reason I win a shot, or like I put a winner inside of the court, and then I sing no, no, no.
No,
So I don't
no.
know why, for some reason for some reason that song was inside of my head that day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. 19-year-old Russian tennis champ Mirra Andreeva, the youngest woman to win the French Open in more than 30 years, in the Extra Scoop tells us what song was in her head as she sunk the final shot. Plus, there is a fight brewing in D.C. over the UFC match scheduled to take place at the White House this weekend. We're going to talk about why a MAGA fundraiser is adding fuel to the fire over the smackdown on the South Lawn. Up first, though. So President Trump says that Iran shot down a U.S. military helicopter over the Strait of Hormuz earlier today. In a Truth Social post, the president wrote that while the helicopter's 2 crew members were uninjured, the U.S., quote, must of necessity respond to this attack. At this point, we have no idea what that means. But it's coming just days after Iran and Israel exchanged fire for the first time since the first ceasefire was reached back in April. And while the president keeps reiterating that a deal with Iran is imminent, even saying that again today, Israel's attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon have been a sticking point for Iran. And there are indications that Prime Minister Netanyahu is feeling this pressure. So what does that pressure look like for him? And can the war really end soon if Israel is intent on continuing to fight in Lebanon? For this, I want to bring in Matt Bradley, international correspondent for NBC News. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Yasmin.
I want to talk about, Matt, the Strait of Hormuz, because you are in Doha, Qatar right now. Normally, you are based for NBC News in Tel Aviv in Israel. But the president has said that once the United States reaches a deal with Iran, the strait will be immediately reopened. What is the status of the strait right now and the potential for that to become a reality, for them to reach a deal and for the strait to be immediately reopened and operations going as normal?
Well, as with everything with this administration, it kind of depends on who you believe. And the Trump administration and Trump himself just said, once again, he used his magical 2-week window, saying that we were going to have some sort of deal probably within 2 weeks. Earlier, he had said that the strait could be blocked until September, so he goes back and forth, threatening to once again go to war against Iran. When we saw this conflagration break out for the first time since the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, and that was just over the past couple of days, it really did look as though there were potential to ratchet up this situation back into a full-on, all-out war. That didn't happen. And one of the things that President Trump was saying around that was that it looks as though he's close to a deal, and that if Israel were to escalate, that it could ruin the prospects for a deal. The fact is that we saw Iran firing on Israel for the first time since the ceasefire, not because they were fired upon directly, but because Israel fired upon the neighborhood of Dahia outside of Beirut.
Right.
So in other words, Iran decided to take the war into its own hands once again and fire directly at Israel because of events in a third country.
If we talk first about what happened between Israel and Iran over the weekend, the president then asked them to back off. They have since backed off, although Iran has said they're negotiating, but their hands are still on the trigger. Their finger is still on the trigger, right? How do we know how it is that they were able to calm the fighting between the two countries?
Between Israel and
Israel.
It looks as though the president prevailed upon the Israelis not to retaliate in the muscular way that certainly Benjamin Netanyahu and so many people in Israel wanted him to. It looks as though the president tried to stop Netanyahu from firing back at all. Netanyahu, it sounds like, or must have, pushed back against that and decided that he could retaliate in a way that was still contained. But we don't know exactly. I mean, this is still a really, really tough situation, and one where the Israelis are definitely itching to mount a muscular response, and not just against Iran, but also against Hezbollah.
But we do know the president had a phone call, and he confirmed this Axios report with Netanyahu, in which he called him, quote unquote, crazy for continuing to attack Lebanon. Do we know the status, Matt, of their relationship amidst this time in which the president is trying to strike a peace deal and Netanyahu is continuing to fire on Lebanon?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we were saying, this is a strained relationship, but one that when we've heard from Trump and we've heard from Netanyahu, they've both tried to play that down. You're referring to the conversation where President Trump called Netanyahu effing crazy, which just sounds effing crazy in the diplomatic world to say. So he did. He said it. He confirmed it. But this really isn't the first time that the president has publicly diminished, some would use the word humiliated, the Israeli prime minister. And both men have still stuck by each other. So, both men need each other. Netanyahu certainly needs Trump more than Trump needs Netanyahu. But when we heard from Netanyahu speaking last time, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, well, this is how best friends fight. This is how families fight. This isn't a real rift. This is just a disagreement between two men who love each other. Now, whether you believe that or not, this is still the most public rift over the last 2 weeks that we've seen so far.
I want to talk about whether or not Netanyahu has staying power in Israeli politics and Israeli leadership, because there is an election this fall there. We have talked repeatedly about all of these ongoing conflicts being the only thing that is keeping Prime Minister Netanyahu in power, whether or not we're talking about Gaza, whether or not we're talking about conflict or war with Iran, conflict or war with Lebanon. How popular is he right now amongst Israelis? And what are the biggest challenges he faces going into this election?
I would say the answer, no matter what the polls say, no matter what protests you see on the street, no matter what folks in Israel are saying, Netanyahu is a consummate survivor. He always has a shot. He will always be able to turn this around on some level. Now, whether or not that means he's going to win the election, I don't know. The likelihood is decreasing because he is unpopular, as you were saying. And you're right. I think that as a wartime prime minister, that does give him a little extra oomph. Really, the only thing right now, other than the fraud accusations and just his general unpopularity, and the fact that he's been at the helm for so long, and a lot of people are frankly sick of him. The real thing is that this Iran war didn't deliver what he promised the Israeli people. For Iran, it didn't deliver what he promised them with Hezbollah. And now everything that's happening looks like he's trying to recover. And so it has cost him quite a bit. And you can see that in the polling numbers when Israelis are asked directly about the war. However, the polls do show that despite that there are some opposition figures in this very fractured political system that are coming together and trying to make alliances that could potentially challenge Netanyahu is still pretty popular. And one of the things that I say when it comes to Netanyahu, people like to say, it's a cliche to say that Netanyahu is a divisive figure. In a way, Netanyahu isn't causing the divisions. He is a product of those divisions.
I think some would argue with you about that, though, whether or not Netanyahu is causing the divisions, if he's the one who's trying to
he thrives on them.
Right.
He thrives on these divisions. And one of the reasons why, and you saw this from before October 7th too, there were protests in the street because of his judicial reform bills. He was extremely unpopular on paper. But when it comes to the horse trading that creates the governments, when the votes are cast and when the members of the Knesset take their seats and they decide, how they're going to arrange the government, who's going to ally with whom, this is how things work in a parliamentary system, he tends to come out on top. And again, not just because he's so popular, though he is in some quarters, but because of the divisions within the Israeli polity, it allows for him to create alliances and a government that lets him survive.
Matt Bradley, thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin.
It is still Extreme Makeover White House edition down in Washington, D.C. But this time, the build is only temporary. It's this huge double-arched cage on the White House lawn for this weekend's UFC fight. The match is set to take place on President Trump's 80th birthday. It's part of the White House's planned events to commemorate the 250th anniversary of America. But while tickets for the UFC fight are free, a Trump-backed super PAC just announced they're going to be hosting a $1 million per person fundraiser the day before the fight. So it raises a very big question. Who is footing the bill for this party and who stands to make the money off it? For that, I want to bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Matt Dixon. Hi, Matt.
Hey, yeah, I don't know about you, but I've never gotten a 90-foot fighting cage for my birthday. So
No, although it's always next year.
Yeah,
It's
no,
always
no.
next year.
Every year I ask my parents, and every year it's just a bike,
Let's talk about this fundraiser Saturday night. What do we know about the event? And what do we know about where the money's going?
It is being hosted by Trump has at this point sort of a broader political orbit. There's several organizations, but the biggest one is one called MAGA Inc., and they're the ones putting this on. It's at his resort in Virginia, and we assume there'll probably be a lot of crossover from large donors and folks who are at the fundraiser who are also going to the UFC fight, and that's why the timing is coinciding with it. And it's a pretty big number they're doing, and these are rare. It's $1 million a person. MAGA Inc. has done a few of those. We found about 6 or 7 of them, so it's not totally unheard of, but it's a pretty big money event that's set to sort of be set off with the UFC fight.
So do we know where the money's going?
Yeah, it'll go to MAGA Inc. It's a fundraiser for that super PAC. So whatever they raise, and presumably it'll be a lot of money, will go to that super PAC, which will almost certainly play in pretty key midterm Senate races, midterm House races, most notably the Texas Senate race. I think they're going to have a big role in. So they're going to raise money, and the idea is that a lot of it's going to be used in midterm races.
And you said it's an estate in Virginia?
Yeah, it's a Trump-owned facility in Northern Virginia. It's one of his resorts, one of his golf, I guess a resort or a golf club.
So we have the fundraiser Saturday night. Then you have the fight on the White House lawn on Sunday. People familiar with the matter are saying the two events are separate, but the timing should allow the attendees, some of them at least, to go to both. And technically for this fight at the White House, the tickets are free. UFC is supposedly fully funding the event, but they are selling sponsorship packages for $1 million or more. So I think a couple of questions here is who is getting tickets and who is making or losing money on the event?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things to break down. I think there's 4,000 people there, and the tickets are free. I think there are going to be some, military folks and folks who legitimately get free tickets. But the lawn seats, it's on the South Lawn. Those are sort of the big ones. So presumably there's going to be a lot of donors, these corporate sponsorships. NBC News, a story I was involved in last month, is the one who reported that sponsorship packages are going up to $1 million. UFC has said publicly they're funding everything, and they actually anticipate losing as much as $30 million on this. There's actually a lawsuit that was filed over the weekend challenging that idea. Sort of a public interest group filed a lawsuit saying that they're using sort of government property, public property for improper for-profit gain. And they allege that, the UFC is obviously going to make money off of this. That's refuted by the UFC. So how much money comes in or out the door strictly related to the event is kind of up in the air right now. And there is a legal challenge to this at the moment. And I don't know if it's going to be, we don't know if it's going to be expedited enough to actually stop the event, but it's in front of a judge.
The president is a very big sports fan. We saw him at the NBA Finals last night here in New York City at Madison Square Garden. He sits ringside at UFC fights a lot. He's had a decades-long relationship with Dana White, who is the chief executive of the UFC. Explain for me more, if you can, Matt, the connection between both Dana and the president.
It goes back to the very start of UFC. I believe it was the first ever UFC fight was held at a Trump-owned Atlantic City casino. So they have or hotel or resort, but it was a Trump-owned property in Atlantic City where I think it was the first UFC fight ever. So they go back, like you had mentioned, decades, and it's from the very origins of the UFC. Over the years, they have become very good friends. Dana White has given money to Trump, aligned political organizations and super PACs and things like that. And Trump regularly goes to fights. He regularly sort of hypes fights on social media. And of course, when he's in the crowd, he gets big cheers. UFC fan base is generally very pro-Trump. So it's sort of an orbit, he really likes to be in. It plays to sort of the fact that he obviously, likes to get attention and be the center of attention. UFC fights give him that. And Dana White has certainly been happy to facilitate that, because early on when UFC wasn't doing very well, Trump allowed them to use properties, and when it was a much smaller organization. So that's kind of the foundation for the relationship.
This is being billed as, obviously, as I mentioned, a celebration of the president's birthday turning 80. It is also being billed as part of the celebration of this nation's birthday, 250. But it's not the only U.S. 250 event that is kind of getting some flack, some pushback. How does this fit into the larger picture of the way in which this administration is looking to celebrate the 250th birthday of this country?
It's sort of truly Trump fashion. Everything is big and splashy. There's races in DC. This sort of really kicks it off. There's been other smaller events, but this is sort of the big one. And what just happened with the reflecting pool and some other monument refurbishments in DC, everything is going to be sort of splashy and sparkly and big and sort of in Trump's image. And I think, a major UFC fight at the White House is, without question, sort of the capstone of that.
Matt Dixon, thank you.
Thank you.
So before we go, we've got a special surprise for you. 19-year-old Russian tennis player Mirra Andreeva, who became the youngest woman to win the French Open singles tournament since Monica Seles back in 1992. So Andreeva burst onto the scene at 15 years old. She became the youngest WTA 1000 champion ever when she won the Dubai Open at 17. And it sounds like she's just getting started. Hi, Mirra.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
It's so good to have you. At your very first French Open, you said you were going to win 25 Grand Slams. Then when you won last weekend, you were actually wearing a jacket. And that jacket said, quote, "I want to thank myself." And then you said that you wanted to thank yourself for believing in yourself. Tell me why you felt that way and why you wanted to wear it and say it.
Well, that's kind of one of my trademarks now. Every time I do the speech at the ceremony after I win the tournament, it all started with me just, copying Snoop Dogg and being funny and, to joke around. And after I won the French Open, that's what I felt like I needed to say, and that's what I felt like helped me to play better and to win. I decided to thank myself for always, staying focused, believing in myself no matter what.
You've said that you've had to fight so many demons in your past and inside of you. I know that you have a sports psychologist on your team as well. A lot of young athletes especially have been more forthcoming about some of their mental health struggles and how it is they deal with it, especially in these high pressure situations. Has this been something that you've struggled with, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, I felt like I've been always super frustrated on the court, especially when I was younger. It's because probably I really want to win, and when everything is not going according to the plan, or when I start losing or something like this happens, I start to get frustrated and very emotional and very negative and down on myself. And that's why we started working with a psychologist in order for her to help me use different techniques. And I feel like for some reason younger generations are a little bit more open about it. I don't know why. I'm always very, very honest when I give interviews or when I talk to people, and I feel like this is the part where I'm also trying to be honest and just share, some parts of what I've been going through and some moments of my career, so people also understand that it's not just, easy like that just because you play well.
How do you switch the script then for you when you're being down on yourself, when you're saying mean things to yourself, when you're not believing in yourself? How do you switch the script?
Well, it's not always working, I would say, but I'm trying
I hear you, by the way. I hear you.
Yeah.
I've been there as well.
Thank you. So I always have a song playing in my mind. So I don't know, depending on the day, it's a different song. So I try to sometimes put my focus on the song that is in my mind, or I try to put my focus on whatever my team is telling me. But I also try to just, kind of talk over that negative voice inside of me, and I try to really talk over and say some positive things, some encouragement words to kind of fight back to that negative side.
What song were you hearing in your head when you won the French Open in the finals?
I don't know, for some reason during that day, there was a song of Amy Winehouse, Rehab. I don't know why. Maybe I just listened to it in my headphones before the match or before the practice, and for some reason I win a shot, or like I put a winner inside of the court, and then I sing no. So I don't know why, for some reason that song was inside of my head that day.
I want to talk a little bit about Serena Williams, too, because she is making a comeback after taking a 4-year-long break, but she's not making a comeback in singles. She's actually coming back in doubles. You're actually a stellar doubles player. You've been there. What do you make of her potentially coming back and you possibly having to face down Serena Williams at the net in a doubles match?
Well, I do think that it's amazing that she's coming back. I mean, after so many things that she's done for the sport and so many tournaments that she's won, I don't know why she's coming back, but my opinion would be that probably it's just that because she's maybe just wants to enjoy a little bit more, on her when she plays. So I feel like, I don't know. It would be amazing if I would face her in doubles. It would be very, very exciting. But I don't know. I would be honest, I would be a little bit nervous probably because I don't know. I've never played against.
Of course.
Yes. So we'll see. I don't know.
Mirra Andreeva, congratulations on all your wins so far. We will be watching, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, that is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yazan Basugin. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.